Good afternoon. It is Monday, March 8th, 2021 at 1:30 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is a virtual special budget workshop meeting, budget number 5, I believe, of the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach. Again, calling this meeting to order at 1:30 p.m. I'd like to take a roll call vote to start off with. Commissioner Richard Byrne.
Here.
Commissioner Edward Sanowski.
Here.
Commissioner Susan Gay.
Here.
Commissioner Jay Legree.
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett.
Here.
Commissioner Pat Caluzzi.
Here.
And Mayor Stan Mills. We have a full complement of the mayor and commissioners today. That's a quorum, and we're able to formally conduct business. Thank you all for being here. I'd also like to welcome our watchers that are on the screen watching us today. And also thank those that registered in advance to participate. That includes Julie Davis and Charlie Walker of Liberty Parks and Playground. Thank you for your willingness to give us input and participate in this meeting. With that, I wanted to go to a reminder that support documents, as they are available, are embedded into the agenda. Go to cityofrehoboth.com, click on the right middle of the page where the legislative portal is, and then seek the meeting documents. With that, I want to identify correspondence. Embedded in the agenda is a letter from Julie Davis having to do, I think primarily, if I recall, with age targeting of playgrounds and tot lot areas. We'll also like to know that after the deadline, we received some communication letters from Henry Weissiger, Tim Gertis, Vicki Gertis, Robert Brickley, Lisa Trey, and Alex Casidis. They're all somewhat of a form letter that had the same information on them, and we'll get those embedded in the agenda after this meeting. I want to take these things as the chair. I have prerogative to change sequencing of these agenda items. I would first like to take on the tot lot, and then we'll move on to the broader subject of the overall budget. As far as the tot lot discussion, I'd like to do a quick recap. And that's that the tot lot was assessed by 2 or 3 certified playground inspectors, and all of them indicated the tot lot is at the end of its useful life and needs replacing. We've learned in past meetings that any new playgrounds or tot lots, and including replacements, have to be made ADA compliant. In my view, the way I look at ADA compliance broadly is it means access to and from the play areas have to be ADA compliant with ramps and low slopes to access it, by example. The ground within the play areas have to be firm enough for ADA compliance. Specified play equipment should be ADA compliant, meaning usable by the disabled. So what have we learned about the play areas so far? The play areas can target different ages. I believe the consensus from this group was to maintain this play area as a tot lot. We can confirm that, and meaning it was aimed at the younger children. We noticed the plans indicate that it's aimed at children from 2 to 12 years of age, and we can talk about that later when we have the playground designer on to see if that's appropriate or if we want to reduce the targeted age for those that use the playgrounds or tot lots. What else have we learned? We've learned that the size or the footprint of the play area accommodates a variety of different play equipment, but it also consumes more ground space, of course. The existing size I'm identifying as small. The current footprint, we'll refer to that as a small size playground or tot lot. And then we also have had in front of us a large size play area. I'm calling it large because it extended in the existing footprint in a westerly direction, a little over 2 times the size of that current footprint. So far we've looked at a small and a large design. We've also learned that cost estimates range from $100,000 to $350,000, depending on size and equipment, etc. If you recall, the charge to our arborist at the last meeting we held was to provide a layout of the same size as the existing tot lot, so that we can get an idea of what type of equipment could fit in the existing footprint. We also charged her with providing a second optional design, approximately 50% bigger, somewhat sized midway between the original large layout and the current footprint. Unfortunately, we did not fulfill that for the next meeting to be scheduled, and it was inadvertently put in there the current layout, but also the large layout in the last meeting support documents. And because the wrong literature was in there, wrong support documents were in there, I pulled that from the agenda. Large design is not under consideration today or again, unless somebody wants to bring it up, but otherwise I don't intend it to come in front of us again. Also, while we're talking about what's not to come in front of us, is the Gerar Master Plan. You recall the Gerar Master Plan proposed and introduced to us has a kayak launch, water feature, renovated, enlarged play area or tot lot, and other features. That also is not on the agenda today. It's not for discussion. It'll likely be on a future discussion because it's on a capital improvement proposal. But again, I'm not intending for that to enter into any conversation today. So on the discussion table today is two plans, a small and a medium design. I intend us to vote on a path forward today. I hope we can get that far. And today we have with us City Arborist Liz Lingo. We also have Charlie Walker of Liberty Parks and Playgrounds with us. He's agreed to come here. He's been a longstanding, had a longstanding relationship with the city, helping to take care of other playgrounds in the city. And he's here to help us understand ADA compliance, provide details of construction, and answer any other questions that we might have. Support documents, again, were vetted into the agenda, include a topo map, option one, and option one floor plan or plan, and rendering. That's a small size. Other support documents include option two, plan, layout, and a rendering. That's a medium size, and then some costing estimates in there. Excuse me. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Sharon Lynn, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Commissioners. And Charlie Walker, Mr. Walker, I really appreciate the time here taken out to speak with the Commissioners today, and hopefully trying to give them, educate them a bit and give them some guidance on your two plans. Liz, I appreciate you being on the line also. I know you're on vacation, and it's important that we get this behind us. So thank you both. And Mr. Walker, if you wouldn't mind starting out with your two options, let's go with the current footprint first. And if you want to actually, just talk about ADA and compliance, that would be very helpful.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes, you're good, Charlie. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, folks, for inviting me to participate in this meeting. As Sharon said, we've had quite a long-standing relationship with the city, dating back to the days of Mr. Faris, and I've certainly appreciated the opportunity to work with you folks for so many years. We've provided equipment over at Silver Lake, as well as Grove, the fitness and playground equipment there. So again, thank you. With respect to these two plans, they are both ADA accessible. And to just clarify the difference between ADA accessible and wheelchair accessible, yes, there is a difference. So you can have a tot lot that would fully comply with the rules and guidelines set forth by the ADA, but it may not be wheelchair accessible. So the designs that we have provided do have ramped access to elevated decks. So many more of the events are wheelchair accessible. So that's a nice feature to add. I don't believe any of the parks in the city currently have this type of design. And once you begin to add these ramps, you now get into what is called an inclusive playground, more so than a park that does not have these ramped access points. And of course, inclusive is a big buzzword in our industry now. If you've done any research into playground equipment, you've probably stumbled upon that. And there's a whole host, a whole set of new equipment out there that is inclusive for kids. And when we say inclusive, that doesn't just mean physical, addressing physical access, but also cognitive development for kids that may be on the autistic spectrum. So I could go on and on about it, but there's been a lot of research to the benefits of various types of equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, in our two designs, we've got a lot of equipment that would fall into that inclusive category. As you look at that, you've got multiple ramps, a sensory tunnel, where a child in a wheelchair could go through the tunnel and experience different events on play panels. That's in the lower left.
Charlie, do you have those documents to share? If not, I'd like to share them on the screen.
Yeah, I could share them. That's a great idea. Thank you. Let's see if I can. Will you share my screen, or how do I? How can I do that?
Down in the center bottom of your window there, you should have a green button that says share.
Got it. Yep. Okay. So let's go to screen share. Okay. Can you guys see that?
There we go. Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. So when I'm referring to the sensory tunnel, if you see my cursor hovering over this thing that looks like a tunnel, that's what that is. And so a child can go in there either via a wheelchair, a walker, and enjoy ground level play. Those panels can be switched out. There's a whole host of panels, from music to puzzles, lots of different options there. Here is an example of the ramp up to about a 1-foot deck. A child can then, in a wheelchair, move over to this piece here called the Ultra-Glide, and that's really great. It's got motion, which oftentimes kids in wheelchairs don't experience. So again, brings in that whole sensory component of play. And then you've got another option here. The child can go up the ramp to a higher level deck, slides, climbers, etc. And all of this, this is just an initial shot, if you will, at this. These items can be changed and tweaked, but the concept is here that I think, from what I was, is what you guys are trying to address: a more inclusive environment for kids. We've got the music component over here. Again, a child in a wheelchair can approach these events and take part, playing alongside a kid that is, you might say, able-bodied. This component over here is a whirl, an inclusive whirl. It's flush mounted. Again, a child in a wheelchair can roll right in there and experience motion and play alongside the other kids. Just through here, through this shade, you can barely see it. Let me see if I've got a better example of that is what we call an accelerator swing, multi-user swing. Again, the idea with this is that a child may be playing with their sibling, friend who's not able-bodied, maybe uncomfortable, maybe even a parent or a caregiver can get on this swing with a child and play up right alongside them, assist them in experiencing what it is like to actually swing. Okay, so that's the first one. That fits within the footprint that you already have there at Gerar. And before I forget, one thing you guys really want to consider is the surface. Most of the other parks, if not all of the other parks, have a wood fiber surface, which is perfectly fine. It is compliant with all the current guidelines. As you may know, it needs to be replenished just about every year. But it's not an ideal surface if you're trying to provide a playground for kids with special needs. Okay, the number one most important factor when we've surveyed, and not just us here locally, but our parent company, surveyed caregivers, parents of children with special needs when taking them to a playground, is a unitary surface. And what I mean by unitary is it's not going to be pushed around, it's not going to move like a wood fiber or a loose fill rubber. It's a poured in place surface or a synthetic turf. Okay? Because think about it, if you have a child in a wheelchair or a child with a walker, if you can't get to the equipment via an accessible surface, the equipment itself is, not rendered useless, but it just makes it a lot more difficult. So, any questions?
Charlie, before you move on, would you explain the difference between ground space and protective area? Your drawings have two dimensions there, ground space and protective area.
Right. So the larger dimensions, the protective area, is actually the space that would be required. That's the space that takes into account the use zones. Another term for that would be safety zone. So the first number, the ground space, is the limits of ground taken up by the equipment itself. All right, not including the use zone. The number you want to focus in on is your protective area. That would be the actual size of the playground.
So, a question, Charlie.
Yes, sir.
Is option one identical to the current footprint?
I believe it is. It's very close. Liz had provided me some measurements on that, and we're within a few feet.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And that includes the protected area, you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Charlie, if you would go on to option two, but at some point, before we go to the commissioners, perhaps we can identify targeting age groups and the ability to change this, and whether a spread from ages 2 to 12 is too big a spread. And then construction methodology, there were questions about how this is installed among trees, and how we would be able to expand in a westerly direction, whether retaining wall would be needed, et cetera. So go ahead and continue, please, Charlie.
Okay. What you see on the screen now is option 2. It's the same structure, the same. We've kept the accelerator swing, we've kept the inclusive whirl, but we've moved around the sensory tunnel and the music to just kind of space some things out a little bit, which I think just makes the playground a little bit more user-friendly. It's not so congested. And then we were able to add 4 bays of swings here. So we have 2 of your traditional belt seats, 2 of the top seats, which you've probably seen at the parks, where the parent lifts the kid and drops them in the seat, so to speak. We've got a seat here that allows for an adult and a tot to swing at the same time on. Pretty neat new product. And then we have an inclusive seat here, which would require that a caregiver or parent assist a child to get up into that seat. And then there's a nice harness that comes down over there, so they're very secure. So that one takes up a little bit more space. And obviously the price goes up as we add that poured in place rubber. The age for both of them, 2 to 12. You know, I think that's a great age range to start with. You know, when we're dealing with age groups in playgrounds, the typical breakdown is 2 to 5 and 5 to 12. Now, what we'll do on occasion when there's some equipment in there that we feel would be usable by kids that are older than 5, they'll label it 2 to 12. It's somewhat of a subjective rating as opposed to the 2 to 5 and 5 to 12 are very exact. Does that make sense at all?
Thank you.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, any questions about either the design or construction methods? Happy to try to field those.
Mr. Walker, thank you. This is Patrick Gossett. Just curious on this protective area.
Yes,
Is that what, for visual reference, is that what we see as the, if you will, the brown area, certainly on shown on this current slide, or is that smaller or larger?
You hit the nail on the head, sir. That's correct. That is the protective area there.
And I don't see this. I'm just maybe misidentifying on it here. But what is the protected area square footage wise of what we're seeing right here?
This one is 6,573.
And option 1 is 4130, I believe.
Option 1 is about 4,200.
Okay. But that's what we refer to as the poured in place safety turf area?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Of course.
Ms. Rohr, I have a question about, this is Commissioner Gay. I have a question about the synthetic turf that you mentioned.
Okay.
Is it permeable?
Yes, it is.
It is, okay.
Yeah. Now, we haven't talked too much about synthetic turf. This is a safety turf, which is a poured in place rubber. The brand name, the manufacturer that we use is safety turf, not to be confused with artificial turf.
Okay.
As happens quite frequently.
Yeah, the name synthetic doesn't come across as sounding environmentally friendly, but you're saying that it is.
Yeah, the product we actually use too, in the event that it, would break down 20 years from now, is 100% recyclable, unlike some of our competitors.
Okay.
That's again the artificial turf. Fortunately, let's see here. Or fortunately rather, the porosity of the safety turf, the poured in place rubber, is equivalent of 12 inches per hour of rainfall to flow through it. So it's very porous.
Mhm.
That's a 2-layer system. The top layer is a man-made product. It's a very durable color product, about a 1/2 inch thick. The layer beneath that varies in depth based on the height of your equipment, and that's made from recycled tires. And that's all put down on a clean stone base, similar to what you would use in a septic system.
Ready, catch it? How thick?
Which one? The stone base? The stone base is 4 inches.
4 inches, okay. How about the rubber?
I believe the rubber we're looking at for your system is a 3-inch depth.
Okay. Thank you.
Certainly. And if you want to see these products, We just did Rehoboth Elementary last year. Be a great place to run over there. Take a look at both products over there. We have the green synthetic turf, looks like AstroTurf, and then we have the poured in place surface there as well.
Have you encountered any situation like ours where the playgrounds or tot lots are in close proximities to a body of water? And if so, have you had to evaluate environmental concerns?
We have not had to evaluate environmental concerns. I think because, again, the product is pervious in nature. You're not going to have particulate matter from the surface runoff, and anything that you would have as far as rainfall, again, is going to permeate through the surface into the stone bed and into the subsoil. So if it was pervious in nature, yeah, I think we would run into that. But given the fact that it's not been an issue to this point. We've been doing this 15 years.
All righty. And we'll go to the public shortly, but review our cost estimates of option 1, small, current footprint, and option 2, medium size.
Okay, so first and foremost, these numbers are based on the Delaware state contract. We actually hold 2 contracts with the state, one for playground equipment and one for what they call mulch, which is a little bit of a misnomer. It should be mulch and protective surfacing because it does include not only the wood mulch that you all typically use, but this safety turf poured in place surfacing that we're referencing. And we are the only provider in the state, I believe, that provides both the equipment and this poured in place surfacing. Some of my competitors may provide the equipment and not the surfacing, or the surfacing and perhaps not the equipment. So I'm looking at the proposal for option number 1. That's the one with a total of $213,694.35.
213.
Charlie, it's Liz. I might want to interrupt you because when I put together the cost estimate for the commissioners, I included things like fencing and landscaping.
Okay.
So it might be better if somebody can share the one attachment, and it can be me if I can find it on my computer.
Here we go.
Here, I can, yeah. That way, when he says his numbers, you guys, and if it was like $217, I rounded it up to $250 for the sake of clarity. I didn't think we needed to see the 43 cents. So,
Gotcha.
Yeah, because like you, obviously you didn't have fencing and walkway to the playground and stuff in there. So I wanted them to be able to get the full picture of what the project would cost, not just the equipment.
Perfect. But it keeps going. This one?
I think
hold on, folks. I'm trying to enlarge it.
Yeah.
Huh?
There you
Oh.
go. There she goes.
Hold on. Okay.
There we go.
Okay, here we go. This is in our support document packet. So we've got option 1. We'll go to the bottom line, Liz. Option 1 is say $275,000.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the small existing footprint. And then the option 2 is the medium footprint for $325,000 essentially.
Yes, and then we do have the couple of fixed costs down there, which would be a couple of reviews, permits for stormwater, and then the demolition.
Okay, so these are plus or minus fixture prices, but it gives us an idea for comparative points of view.
Yeah.
So let's, if you don't mind, while I'm in here, I would like to go back somewhere. Almost there. Here we go. Well, I goofed again. Here we go. This is the topo map. I don't know if I can get much. Yeah, here we go. Much bigger, but here's the Henlopen Hotel. Here's Lake Avenue over here. You can see the lake here. And here's the footprint of, is that option one that's overlaid in here?
Yes, sir. Pretty close.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
pretty
that,
much.
okay, so this is essentially mimics the existing current footprint as well as the option one footprint. And you can see all the trees here. It, for the most part, looks like it preserves most of the trees. And if you went with option two, Liz, I think you indicated that it would be expanded it over in a westerly direction over here, which means it would take out some extra trees. So again, in front of us today are two options. Option one, small in the current footprint, and option two, about 50% bigger, that would extend in a westerly direction and require removal of some trees and likely the replanting of some trees. Does anybody want to add anything?
I have questions, but nothing to add right now. I have questions of Charlie.
Okay, go ahead.
Charlie, have you been the company that's been maintaining our playgrounds?
Yes, sir.
What year was the playground that we're talking about right now built?
This would have actually been one that we did not provide. This was, golly, so I'm not exactly sure. I can tell you that I remember going down for Mr. Faris in, must have been 2008, and doing some painting to the structure, trying to caress it and get some more years out of it. But I do not know when that unit was installed.
Okay, yeah, it's obvious there are several places where it's been painted. When was the last time you looked at that playground?
It's probably been a couple of years. I looked at it, for purposes of looking for broken parts or inspected it.
Were you the person who's been maintaining it since 2008?
I can't speak to that in its entirety, but we have done some work to it. Again, that's one of our competitor structures, so I can't get parts for that per se. But Greg would oftentimes ask me, "Hey, Charlie, come down, take a look at the playgrounds," and I would do that and report back to him my findings. But with respect to this particular structure, I was unable to get parts for it.
I hear you. So you have not been maintaining it then?
We've been doing like some of the wood fiber, maybe an occasional swing seat or that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because it's badly deteriorated, and it's deteriorated from corrosion from the ocean. If you were advising someone to build a new playground, that appears to be just a regular carbon steel playground that's been covered with some kind of vinyl, and then somebody has come along and tried to paint it a few times. Am I correct, or is that it doesn't appear to be powder coated?
It was. I would imagine it would have been. I can't speak to the competitors' processes years ago, but I would think it would have been powder coated. And of course, those processes have been improved. And years ago, we would see fading and evidence of corrosion, especially on the coastal areas. But those processes certainly have improved.
Commissioner Legree, I just looked at a photograph of the Tot Lot, the sign, because a lot of people donated funds for that.
Yes.
And there's no date on it, so my best recollection is that is anywhere from 15 to 18 years old, by my best recollection.
Yeah, uh, I spent an hour crawling over it yesterday. And by the way, when you crawl, when you're 6 feet tall and you crawl over this playground, people look at you funny when they walk by. But yeah, it is severely corroded and deteriorated. The fence around it is badly deteriorated. There's a sign on it that says playground closed, and there's a gate in back that's wide open. I'm sure we have liability there that we need to do. We need to shut that gate and lock it, secure that area. How much excavation are you going to be doing in that location if you replace that playground with option 1?
Right. That's a great question. That's going to depend on how deep that current mulch is. And I have to be honest with you, I have not been down there to take some test samples. I would hope that it would be somewhere around 8 inches. I don't know the actual depth. We would have to get down to, a nice stable base. And I'm not saying it's got to be compacted to the point where you're going to run a truck over it, because we're not doing that. But the last thing we would want to do is put all this money into a surface that's not held up by a good, stable, firm base.
Mm-hmm.
So generally, it's about 8 inches.
Okay. I think I counted up more than that when I added your is that an aggregate base?
Yes, sir.
What size?
It's 4-inch depth, and it's 57 stone. So it's a clean 5s and 7s, no fines.
Mm-hmm.
And the clean stone allows, of course, for better drainage, and also gives us the compaction rating, the head impact criteria, the rating that we're looking for. Now, if we go 8 inch, so our system would be the 4 inches of stone and the 3 inches of rubber. If we find that we have to go an inch or two more to get to that stable base, we simply would add more stone at no additional cost to you. I mean, it's not that much, an inch or two over 5,000, 6,000 square feet is not a budget buster on my end. So, hope that answers your question. I don't know exactly how deep we would have to go. So,
do you know how deep the water table is there?
No, sir.
And you're going to be excavating 8, 10 inches. And what's the synthetic upper layer that you were talking about? Man-made. You call it a man-made layer.
That's called an EPDM layer, which is acronym for the wear course, for lack of a better term, that gives you the color in these surfaces. And that's part of the 3-inch system. I wish I could share with you an illustration of this. Better understand it here. Let me see what I can find.
You're aware that the state of Delaware has fairly strict limits on putting down aggregate that's in the watershed of a lake.
Well,
I think they specify aggregate no smaller than 1/2 inch and no larger than a diameter or a thickness of 2.5 inches.
okay, so we would be fine then with the 5s and 7s.
Mm-hmm. And they're pretty particular when the soil is so porous as ours is, our sandy soil. They get worried when it's too porous, then it drains right into the groundwater, because if it doesn't have time to if it doesn't have a waiting period, it doesn't have time to settle out the contaminants, the pollution that come in.
Well, I mean, those are certainly some things that I can work alongside with Liz and run by,
I,
deal
I
with
see,
at the state level for
I
sure.
see from your illustration that it's a poured polyethylene binder.
Yes.
Whoa, polyurethane. Oh, okay. Yeah. If you were building a new playground, ADA accessible, would you put it 200 yards from the ocean? If you had a choice? I'm just worrying about the corrosion.
As far as the corrosion goes, we do have a product, the manufacturing process, we call it a coastal primer application that can be put on the steel.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing that, at least in the proposal phase with the Delaware River Bay and Authority for the ones down at Lewis, at the ferry terminals, both north and south.
Mm-hmm.
So I would definitely look at that as an option.
Mm-hmm. Did you do that over on Stockley?
No, we did not.
I was just looking at the surface of the Stockley playground. How long have you been maintaining that one?
Which I'm familiar with. It's the Silver Lake.
Yeah, this is the one you're calling Silver Lake. We call it the Tot Lot on Stockley.
We put that in, I think it was 06, 07, if I'm not mistaken, and then we've been involved in the maintenance of that one since then.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I just, this is a budget meeting. We're diving really deep into details here. Do we think we should pull back a little bit?
No, I think we need to, continue this and get it resolved, Ed,
Okay.
respectfully. Charlie, you want to, give your points on what this slide is so you can take it off so we can see pictures again?
Yeah, so I'm not sure how well you can see these figures here. But essentially, you have your 4 inches of compacted stone here, okay? Then you have the various level depth of your recycled tire buffings. And again, this is the course here that gives you the cushion. And that's dependent upon the height of your equipment. In other words, if you're gonna fall from a 2-foot deck, you don't need as much surfacing as you would if you fall from an 8-foot deck. And then this illustrates your wearing course here, which is always a minimum ½ inch, no matter how thick the wear course. And then there are different applications as to how you finish the edge out, which we have not discussed that in great detail with Liz. So,
Are you putting in Miracle playground equipment?
Yes, sir.
Are those made in Monette, Missouri?
Yes.
Is that what the factory is?
Yes.
And this was made there, or your equipment's made there?
Correct.
And you did the ones over at the elementary school?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I walked by there this morning too. Yeah, I've got a lot more questions, but I don't want to hold everybody up and.
Well, if you don't mind, Jay, let's defer to some others. You know, again, my goal today is to vote on a path forward. Those path forwards could be to budget monies for the current footprint size, small size as presented. It could be to vote to budget monies for the medium size, or it could be to do nothing. But I'd like to get to that point. Any other commissioners? Take down your, would you take off your shared document there, Charlie? Thank you very much. Liz Lingo's been very patient. She's got some things to say.
Sure. I just wanted to chime in a couple of Commissioner Legree's questions. I have the answer to that Charlie wouldn't necessarily, because Charlie, you were last there about 1.5 years ago when we first started this whole cycle with the playgrounds. So just to clarify on that. And then secondly, the playground as we see standing now, our city's records indicate it was purchased and installed in 2003. But there had been a playground there before, like back in the 90s. But the game time equipment that's there now was somewhere in that 2002, 2003 timeframe. That's it.
Again, Liz, the Stockley Tot Lot origin. What year was it?
Stokely and Grove were both around the same time frame, 2006, 2005, 2007, because we had a couple of different components with gazebos, and the workout stuff I think was added later at Grove. But right in those 2 years is when everything got put in, both Stokely and Grove, minus the adult exercise area.
Thanks. The Stockley playground looks like it's brand new. I mean, the powder coating is just phenomenal on it. I don't know where they did that.
Well,
But-
that speaks to one of the reasons we changed and decided to go with Miracle, because we felt that is a better equipment. And I think over time, just like anything else, processes evolve and get a lot better. But the main difference being that is Miracle, and then the other one is Game Time. And I can only speak to the past 5 years I've been here, but whereas Charlie's company, they do the big maintenance pieces like the engineered fiber and replacements of the belt swings, the ropes. We had a cracked climbing wall at Grove. They do all those major repairs. The day-to-day stuff like greasing bolts, blowing off leaves, the city does that. I have one part-time staff who does that on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, depending on the time of year.
Well, if someone would have told me that the Tot Lot by the Henlopen is only 4 years older than the Tot Lot at Stockley, I'd have said, no way.
I know. And, you know, to the extent I can't tell you 100% what they did in 2002 or 3. I mean, but it is a different brand of equipment, and we are a lot closer to the ocean. And anybody, I mean, my parents can tell you they have to change out their doorknob and handle about every 5 years. I mean, it's just when you get close to the ocean, the closer you get, it's the curse of having a 1 mile of oceanfront town. Curse and a blessing for sure.
I know what it's like here on Prospect. It's just everything just corrodes within a year or two.
Yep, but hey, we don't like to move away from the beach either, do we? All right, I'll get back to the discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
I don't have any more questions, Mayor, so I don't want to hold everybody up.
All right, thank you, Jay. Commissioner Gossett?
Yes, just a kind of a clarification. The walkway, and Liz, and the outlined cost estimates, and both of them, you have the walkway from sidewalk to play area. Is that to be cement, or is that the safety turf poured also? And is there any type of general location that you would think that would be placed?
Sure. So the pricing was based off of the most recent sidewalk pricing we've gotten for install the city of Rehoboth for concrete. I'm sure that we could do the safety turf for it, which environmentally would be better. And price wise, I'm sure we could calculate that, and it would I don't even know if it would be that much a difference given the price of concrete these days, to tell you the truth. And I think logistically we had planned on going, because we want a flat slope, so we couldn't go from the closest point of the sidewalk to the playground, because that had like a 3-foot rise on like a 10-foot length. So it wouldn't meet ADA without a switchback and a landing. So we had planned to go from where, and this is with the existing footprint, from where the water fountain is between the playground and the Henlopen, and then cut straight in through the back of the playground that way, which ended up being about 80 linear feet. If we end up expanding the playground, I think we would I kept the same price for budget purposes, but I think we would probably come from the other walkway closer, like west of where the playground is now. Since we would expand the playground west, we would have less new surfacing to put in that way. So it'd probably be a little less price-wise, but not enough to make a huge difference.
So on option one, you would come from the area of the Henlopen directly, sort of east to west?
Yes. I mean, we can, if everybody has different ideas, we can, certainly change that. That seemed like the shortest level path. But obviously we would do more legwork on that. There's a bunch of different areas it could come from. But we don't want to create a new walkway from the road where we're losing a parking space. So we would have to use one of the two existing.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Liz. Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, I actually have a number of questions, but I'll just say at the outset, what Liz was talking about with the walkway, I would certainly hope that whatever we do to replace or change the existing walkway would be made permeable in whatever fashion. But I think I would hope we would use something other than concrete in this day and age. And I'm sort of going back to something Jay said about the fact that it's hard to believe that the Stokely lot's as old as it is, and that is what is the life expectancy, even with the type of materials that are used these days and all of that, and the fact that you can use I guess paints or construct it in some way that is for coastal. But what is the life expectancy of this new playground?
I'll take a stab at that one. Gosh, there's so many factors, and I'm not trying to kind of dance around answering your question directly, but so much of it does depend on use, maintenance, exposure to the elements like we've talked about here. But I think, with good maintenance, supervision, 25 years on the equipment. These surfaces, again, depends on the severity of the weather that we have, the winters, the maintenance. One of the concerns about putting a surface like this in an environment that's shaded by trees is that you get that leaf litter, whether it be pine needles in this case. So if that's not maintained regularly, that's going to contribute to the accelerated degradation of the surface. So, and about, 10, 12 years, it can be resurfaced with just another layer of that EPDM that we talked about earlier. And the cost to do that in today's world is about $7 a square foot. So theoretically, you wouldn't have any major expenses for at least a decade.
Okay. And that was actually going to be my next question, was about maintenance, not just because of being close to the ocean, but because of all the new bells and whistles on some of those sensory elements. What kind of maintenance on an ongoing basis, other than brushing away pine needles, is needed? Is it a lot more? Is it more difficult to maintain or more costly to maintain this new playground than it would the pieces that are there now?
Well, as the components have matured or gotten more complex, you're absolutely right. There's maybe new moving parts that we didn't have in the playgrounds in years prior. The musical instruments, some of the little strikers, the mallets have cables attached to them. So if they are broken, they could need to be replaced as frequently as they're broken. It's just, it's again, dependent upon the type of users that are there and the maintenance program that's intact. If you see some of the metal where it has been scratched, we always ship a maintenance kit with new equipment, which contains aerosol cans of paint. So if that is kept up, that will inhibit rust. So it's just basic maintenance, just evaluating. Liz said, like weekly, she's got somebody out there looking at the playground, just identifying those things quickly and addressing them rather than letting them go for years, which unfortunately does happen in some playground environments just because of staffing issues or people don't see the value in it.
You don't see the need for a maintenance contract, a separate maintenance contract just based on all of the factors in this new equipment that don't exist now. You think it still could be maintained locally?
Yes, and I'd be happy to, as we've done in the past, come down yearly and take a look at it and from my standpoint, see if there's anything that maybe was overlooked by staff that's not necessarily trained to look for things. And I think Liz can speak to our responsiveness. We've always responded in a quick manner to take care of any problems that do arise. The installation, we typically guarantee for 2 years. So if they see anything from a loose bolt to heaven forbid a broken or a piece that was broken due to an installation error or issue, we'll take care of that within the first 2 years at no charge.
That's very good to know. And I hear you say the equipment comes from Missouri, is made there?
Yes, yes, it does.
Are you having any difficulty getting supplies? My understanding is that anything anywhere in the construction world right now is really hard to come by.
Yeah, we've actually been very fortunate. Last summer, they had to shut the factory down for 2 weeks, which caused a bit of a delay, but our lead times are actually improving now. We're back to that 7 to 8 weeks.
Okay. So, Liz, are you still thinking it would be in place this season?
I think as soon as we had the funding and could start identifying the few different grants, I think we would want to move forward rather than, leave what's there, because it just, like somebody mentioned, we just can't leave it. It would have to be demolished. So
there's no question about that. There's no question about it. I think what's there now has to come out. I think the only issue is whether we move ahead now or not,
if we could take that guidance from the mayor and commissioners if we wanted to wait or do it immediately. I think both of those are an option if we can come up with a good reason. But I think it definitely, we would get the sediment and stormwater permits submitted ASAP, because their lead time might be longer than Charlie's through the state. Yeah, so we would want to get that and be able to get our, silt fence up and get everything demolished as soon as possible.
Yes. Definitely.
And also make it usable. We know the city is really busy in the fall. I mean, gosh, it's even busy this time of year, but we're busy in the fall. So, that's when it finishes, plenty of families will be able to enjoy it then too, if we decide to wait.
And just a couple of other observations. I noticed on the cost, and this is just sort of a general observation, I'm not expecting a response to it, but the differences of the cost between the small and the medium, only 1,000 of that are the play elements. So I assume that 4-bay swing is only $1,000, which seems very reasonable to me. But the majority of the cost is in things that I think that I want to describe as environmental activity. And so that's part of the reason that if we're going to do this at all, I would want to stick to the small footprint, because anything else, you can just tell from the cost of doing it, is going to disturb more of the environment. That's one thing. And the other thing I guess I have a question about is I am surprised that it's listed as ages 2 to 12, which I don't think of as a tot lot. And this has always been a tot lot. And several people, I know we have one letter attached to the agenda today, but I've also heard from several other people who point out the dangers of having children from that great age range. So I'm concerned about that. I don't know if who said we have to do 2 to 12? Can we keep it as a tot lot? And if so, would that change some of the equipment? I'm not sure we're even talking about that right now.
We can certainly label this as 2 to 5. Like I said, that 2 to 12 is somewhat ambiguous. What that is saying to the end user is that, hey, there's equipment on here that could be enjoyed by children at an older age, older than 5. Mm-hmm. But by default, being 2 to 12, it's got to be 2 to 5 as well. So we could easily label this as a 2 to 5 playground if that provides you a little bit more comfort and a little bit more descriptive or description as to who this is actually intended for. And that would be perfectly legitimate.
Okay. All right.
But Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong, nothing would change, none of the equipment or anything.
That's right.
Because even in the tot lots we have the belt swings and the tot swings. And I think one of the reasons the equipment comes from the manufacturer labeled in that age range 2 to 12. So it's just whether or not we put a sticker saying age range 2 to 5. But the argument on the other side of that would be, if we are having one inclusive playground and also one ADA compliant playground, by definition, if we're doing an inclusive playground, shouldn't it be inclusive of all ages? Because now we actually are excluding any kid with a disability over the age of 5. So that's just a little food for thought, whether we put a label 2 to 5 or 2 to 12.
But I think there's safety issues on the other side of that. I don't, again, this is sort of new information. A lot of this is new information. That's the problem I'm having with just in terms of deciding quickly. But anyway, I'll shut up now and look, because I see other people have questions too. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like to insert my comments in here. I don't get to raise my hand before we get to Commissioners Gossett, Byrne, and Ms. Stranowski. I believe these playgrounds and areas need to be safe for the user and safe for the environment. I think that's key to our success of doing these. And I have full confidence in our city manager and arborist to work with the folks and ensure that all the rules are being followed and that we're compliant with DNREC and the watershed and all that stuff. I have no doubt about that. For me, it comes down to, do we want an ADA compliant tot lot or not? I say yes.
Absolutely.
I don't want to reduce the amenities in town. Instead, I think we should enhance our amenities that we've got. We should maintain them. We should replace them. We should upgrade them and make them ADA compliant. I'm interested in the same footprint rather than going to the bigger one. I think that helps save some of the trees that are very important to me. And again, I would say let City Manager Liz and Liberty decide on age appropriateness. I think Julie Davis made a very good case for it. And Susan, you just mentioned that.
Yeah.
If we decide, we, meaning the majority, not me, decide not to do anything here, then I would question you on what is the intent for the playground at Cranberry Park, for the playground at Grove Park, for the playground at Stokely Park, Silver Lake Park, that are all in the same similar proximities to a body of water. When it comes time to replace those and maintain those, they're going to be required to be ADA compliant, which means the same type of products that we see here. Are you going to want to take those out? I would absolutely vote against something like that. And that's why I want to start with a stand on what I want here. If we've got 27 plus letters at the last meeting and an extra maybe 7 here this time, only one, if I recall, said to enlarge the lot. And of those, the balance all said go with the smaller one. They were fine with the smaller one. They were fine with the smaller one because it was a smaller footprint and because the cost was less. I don't know that any said take it out and get rid of it. If we have environmental concerns, which I do, absolutely do, but if we want zero impact on our water bodies, then we can't do anything because there is no such thing as zero impact. It's going to impact somehow. And so we have to say, are we going to do our best practices to try to prevent any problems? And again, I believe city manager and arborist can work out something like that to deal it, because if not, and we want zero impact, then we need to remove the asphalt that circumnavigates the lake, and we need to prevent dog walking and dog pooping and peeing in the parks. We can't have any of that, because those, and I'm convinced, I'm no scientist, but I'm convinced those have a greater impact than will the runoff from this park. So I'm suggesting, we're going to go to the public when everybody else is done, see what they say. Although, Julie, I believe I know largely what you're going to say. But otherwise, I would favor the smaller one and budgeting $275 in the budget for this, and move forward with it. So with that, we'll go to Commissioner Gossett, Byrne, and Stranowski.
Thank you, Mayor. Glad to hear your opinion. I also would support the option number 1. I just think to weigh the pros and the cons of what has been proposed here, to look at the benefits for the users and who we've heard from of the number of letters that have come in, I just really believe that that's the best option to go with and set a standard for the future development of other retrofits to other lots, play areas in the city. One question I have is, and I guess City Manager Lynn could address this. Will the city act as the general contractor for this project, or how will that be managed?
The contract would be with, Mr. Walker's, company.
But we also have landscaping and fencing and the walkway that Ms. Lingo indicated that were not part of the original or the play elements. So will that be coordinated by the city, or how will that be administrated?
No, we would, absolutely. And, we'd have to see the, pricing and the costs of it, that were estimated, and see how we best, can, play that in, if you will, with, the construction and the equipment.
But you, or the Director of Public Works, will act as the general contractor overseeing the project? Is that what I'm trying to get at?
Yes, and, you know, of course, with Liz and, Mr. Walker's company, we'd all work together.
And is there any projected timeline that this project would take? Not necessarily if we start today, it's finished by then, but as a 2-month, a 5-month, a 6-month plan? Has that been determined at all?
Do you have an answer to that, Charlie? I mean, your equipment needs to be ordered. How long does that take? And then what's your timeline for getting it in?
Okay. From the time we receive the order, we're presently at a 7 to 8 week lead time. And then for a project of this size, given the fact that it's a larger structure and it would, we're working with stone and a little bit of excavation and the rubber, I would allow an additional month. So I would say about 12 weeks from the time we would get the go ahead to proceed. And that would just be our portion, not of course including the fencing and maybe any site prep like erosion control devices and things of that nature.
So I guess to answer your question, Commissioner Gossett, if the commissioners were to vote on to go ahead with this today and give us the go-ahead to grant this award to Mr. Walker prior to the March 19th vote on the budget, we could get a 10-day 10 days up on it, or we could order everything and award the grant April 1.
So we would probably be looking at completion around July 1 then?
That's 3 months from April 1, give or take, yes.
Okay. Not holding you to it, just trying to get a timeline in place.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Byrne?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thank you for your comments, Mayor, because I generally agree with your thoughts and perspective on all of this. I favor option 1, the smaller one, staying in the current footprint. You know, this is a balancing act between environmental security and usage of our public areas, and I think staying in the current footprint is the wise thing to do and not expand beyond what we have. I like the way that that Charlie described the materials and the surface. I do have a concern in regard to age. If we were to promote it across all of the ages up to 12, I think there are safety concerns of mixing the tots with the preteens. It's not a good thing generally to do, and so I would be in favor of promoting it for really the younger ages, the real tots. And then I have a question about, and this probably goes to Liz, in terms of fencing and landscape. Liz, will the fence, you know, as I'm looking at the rendering, will that follow the, you know, the brown, the tannish safety turf, or is that outside of that? And then what can you tell us about the fencing? Is it is it designed to keep people in and out, or is it more decorative? What is the height? So on.
So the fence at a bare minimum would have to be the edge of the protected space, the edge of the surfacing. It could be a little larger if we wanted to include room for like picnic tables, which is kind of the way it is now. Because if you guys had looked at the topo, like the existing footprint is a really odd shape. So I actually made it a few feet shorter to account for a couple of trees that were growing inside of the play area now. So that we wouldn't have surfacing and equipment right up on top of them. So I think sticking with the protected area, we would still have a little bit of extra space there for the trees and a picnic table. Materials, I specified the new fence at, and this is something fencing pricing has been, anybody who's put in fence lately will know that it has been up and down all over the place. So I specified it at $100 linear foot, which is kind of a medium level fencing, like a white vinyl. We could go cheaper and get a wood or a chain link. I don't like the aesthetic of a chain link, but we could also do the wood, and it is meant as a safety feature because we have a road and we have a body of water, and we want to be able to not have parents be panicking if they look to their left for 1 second, their child's run off to the lake. And I think it ends up being 4 foot tall fencing is the preferred safety height.
Liz, that's all good to hear. Yeah, please stay away from chain link.
We'll do.
It's really ugly as can be.
It's cheap. It serves its purpose. It's cheap and it keeps kids in. But yeah, I think the little bit of upgrade to the white vinyl is worth it with that, or something that even the wood, if you know the price.
We want it chain link in the city of Rehoboth Beach.
Agreed.
And I'm glad that you described the fence as a safety feature. That's great. And you answered, at least partially answered my last question. That is, most of the parks and play areas have some space for the adult caretakers to sit, rest, and so on. And you said that hopefully there'll be room for benches and or picnic tables.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to incorporate, based off of the size I gave Charlie to design, which was smaller than the actual footprint. And that's the reason why, to maintain a couple of those trees in an area where we can have a bench and a picnic table. So I'm pretty confident we'll be able to incorporate those because it's really, if you think about it, Stokely is not fenced, and Grove, the fence is kind of around the whole park. So it was never an issue with those. So it is something we'll have to pay attention to.
Thanks, Liz. Appreciate your work on this.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Sernowski?
Sure. Thank you. So I've got a few things here. Charlie, you said that it's not only ADA compliant, but it is wheelchair and compliant and designated as inclusive, which are all more positive things, correct?
Correct, yeah. So looking at it in the real world, Grove Park is an ADA compliant park. The wood fiber that you all buy from us yearly does meet the ASTM guidelines for accessibility. Now, having said that, who wants to push a wheelchair with a 70-pound child through wood mulch? It's not very realistic, right? So they both are wheelchair and ADA compliant, but when you go to a poured in place surface, it's much more appropriate. It's much more realistic to assume that a mother can push her, her child, whether it be a tot or an older age child, over the surface. And then, of course, you want to look at what's accessible to someone in a wheelchair, where this design has a lot of features: the music, the sensory tunnel, the inclusive whirl, the Alta Glide, where you go up the ramp and you're still in your chair and you're able to experience these events. So that's what I mean by wheelchair accessible. There's no ADA accessible is a recognized national term, criteria. Wheelchair accessible is kind of what we use in explaining to the customer, like you're taking it a step further to provide activities for kids that are bound to wheelchairs.
Okay.
Okay.
Liz, what's going to be the tree removal impact with either one of these options?
So with the smaller option, there would have to be there's 2 trees inside the current playground and 1 leaning on the fence. I believe I will have to see the final arrangement, but potentially one of those could come out because it has, for lack of a more technical term, this will make you guys laugh, but it has like a dog leg, like a whole hunk of half of the tree just is like 5 feet off the ground and goes really hard to the side. So I'm not sure if that tree will be able to be maintained because of the low height of that limb.
Okay.
So it's potential we could lose 1 or 2 with the small footprint because we'll also have to have access to the site for the equipment. And there might be room in the front, but significantly less of an impact than if we extended it to the west where we'd be losing about a half a dozen trees.
And if we were to go with the second option and lose about half a dozen of those, I guess, invasive trees, I think is what you called them, we would replace new trees, native trees, canopy trees on that west side.
Yes, we'll do new trees no matter what, whether we stick with a small footprint or the larger one. I did factor a little bit more money in for the larger design, just because of that, because we'll take out a couple of trees and we'll try to put a few more trees and a little bit more landscaping in as well.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Thank you. And could you remind us, because I know we've had multiple meetings on this, but what the potential for grant raising is, and will it differ whether we go with the smaller or larger option, I guess, with the differing costs or expenses?
I don't think the grants will be affected with either one. They're both fully accessible and inclusive, which is really the most important part. If they're looking for a great project to fund, it would be an inclusive one. So I don't think they're going to look at it and say, oh, well, they don't have these awesome swings and so we're not going to give them a grant. I think both of them will look equally attractive to the committee. And the main grant program we go through is through the state, the ORPT grant, which we have historically always gotten funding from for our playgrounds. So
is that percentage based or amount based?
I believe they can fund up to half.
Okay.
I think that's the stat, but probably Evan or the city manager would know better than I since they work with it more.
Okay. Evan, would you like to speak on that if you're available?
Commissioner, I'm not sure off the top of my head what the percentage is, but I guess that it's at least 50%.
Okay. And what's the second grant?
There's a couple of other grants aimed at like accessibility for disabled children and adults. Okay. So we could look into those a little bit further. There's a whole slew of them out there. So it's just a matter of finding one that works with our time frame and the amount of funding and how likely are we to get it if we apply.
Okay, thanks. So when it comes to in terms of fencing, I think that we want to be cost conscious here, but I think we should start using consistent fencing across the board in the city with our parks. So I would encourage that to be looked at as we're looking at fencing. And I agree, I think it's important to have picnic tables and benches surrounding the playground for mothers and families to be able to sit while their children are playing. My last question, and I don't want to I don't want to, I don't want to start a full-on conversation, but we did get some correspondence from a constituent that did their own research and came up with some options that were, I would say, 40,000 less expensive on the larger side and $75,000 less on the smaller side. Would you be able to shed any insight on that, Liz or Charlie, on what the huge price difference would be on
I
the
would
vendor that they used versus Charlie?
I would guess if you're looking at other options, it would probably be in the surfacing. So I'm not familiar with other proposals. This, as city is the owner operator of the playground, we would, we're the only ones with all the site history and all the files and repairs. So it'd be very difficult for somebody without that information to create an accurate proposal. But my guess, it would be in the surfacing if they did the loose rubber chips, or if they did the engineered wood fiber. I mean, instead of, say 60,000 for the poured in place, the engineered wood fiber might be 10 or 15.
Okay.
That being said, every year the city spends about $10,000 topping up those wood fibers. So we have a lot of maintenance costs with that.
So then I guess I would ask you or Kevin or Evan or Sharon, if we were to select what we want, would we not go out to bid the project rather than issue a contract? And no disrespect from you, Charlie. I'm just looking at the money and best practices.
Well, I think the best thing to see is that it's already been out to bid for the state. They already won the state contract for everything we're putting in. And the state has a very rigorous bidding process.
Okay.
So
that answers my question, and
yeah,
that's good to hear.
And if you break it up, Commissioner, it's bound to come in, more anyway, and the bidding process that the state does is already vetted with the lowest bidder in mind.
Okay, that's perfect, and that is good to hear. So in terms of what option, I'm just going to give my perspective on it. I have to be honest, I'm inclined on going with option 2, or the larger option, for a couple reasons. One, I think there's enough space on the west side there to expand it a little bit. I think replanting some of those those invasive trees wouldn't be a bad thing, and it spreads it out a little bit more. And the fact that it has a swing set on the larger option is something that I find very beneficial. Just going back and thinking to my childhood, playing on playgrounds, much of the other stuff that's there is great and it's fantastic. But I think a lot of kids like swings, and it's something they look forward to in the playground. And I think that's important in the development of children. So I'm kind of leaning in that direction for those reasons.
well,
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner, I do believe, and maybe Charlie can back me up or correct me on this, but I think you're absolutely correct in that I think swings are the number one thing that kids play on in the playground. So
yeah. So I'm a little disappointed that's not an option in one. So I'm in support of having swings.
Yeah, and I think when I talked to Charlie about it, if we put the swings in one, we just don't get a whole lot else in there because they take up a lot of room. But yeah, they are the favorite.
And lastly, I think making this not just ADA compliant but wheelchair compliant, and designated more inclusive. I think the fact that it's so close to a lot of those handicap spots surrounding the VIA and around the Henlopen Hotel, I think there's a lot of parking there that is not always utilized. that are handicapped accessible spots. So I think that I think it's just great. It's a great spot for that. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'd like to go to Commissioner Legree. If there's no more commissioner comments, then I would go to the public. Commissioner Legree?
Yeah, I'm with you on the need for the wish for the ADA compliant playground. I'm with you on the need to demolish it right now before we get sued or before anything stupid happens. However, I believe the playground should be moved away from the ocean, should be moved away from the lake, should be moved away from that sensitive watershed, and not put any more gray infrastructure down. Don't do any excavating that area on a slope. Don't put any crushed up rubber tires down, polyurethane topping. Just move the playground somewhere away from the ocean. And there are other places that we could move it to. And if we couldn't find another place in Rehoboth Beach to move it to, we're failing at our job. And so that's my thoughts. Keep the playground, move it away from the ocean, move it away from the lake. It's only 20 steps from the lake, 200 steps from the ocean. And we're just fighting Mother Nature to keep a playground there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. If there's no other comments by the commissioners, I'd like to go to the public, and that means Julie Davis. Are you still there, Julie?
Oh, indeed, I am.
Eric, go ahead. And I want to remind the commissioners that today's letter was your second letter. We have one from you previously also. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I want to just make a couple of comments relating to the discussion this morning. I was afraid initially that we might be going down a road, you might be going down a road where the perfect was the enemy of the good. The Henlopen owners have never asked for anything more than ADA compliant equipment in the current space. Lots of bells and whistles are included in option 1, and they might be nice, but I don't know that cost-wise they're necessary. Eliminating some of those bells and whistles might give you room for a swing set. Another observation is I've been involved in a project here in Maryland in our condominium community to set aside space for a tot lot. And so as a result, I've had to get a little bit knowledgeable about it. My understanding is that if you're going to limit the age range from 2 to 5, the equipment for the younger children, what they call the fall length, the distance between the ground and the bottom of the equipment, the scale of the equipment, and the cost of the equipment is less than you would have if you were providing equipment that was suitable for children up to age 12. My point is that in terms of the space, you might pick up some space if the scale of the equipment were for the younger children. You might save some money cost-wise, and you would certainly deal with the safety issues that I addressed in my letter. One other design issue I would mention, I have seen we have a unit in the Henlopen on the west side that basically overlooks the tot lot. And I have seen over the years, children come with walkers and in wheelchairs to use the existing space. I had a granddaughter one summer who broke her leg playing soccer and was in a wheelchair when they visited. The wood chips fibers cost about 1/8 of what this poured rubber flooring would be. And I think from everything I've read, it's a lot more environmentally sensitive than the polyurethane with subfloors and stones and so forth, possibly excavation issues. And so I would urge you to consider a flooring, a basis under the equipment of the wood chip fibers that we have in Grove Park and apparently Stockley Street. And finally, I would just mention that, if we keep it simple, that would be, I think, cost-wise, design-wise, we just don't need lots of bells and whistles. ADA compliant, period. And in the current space, I think there's $20,000 worth of landscaping in the option 1 cost figures. I'm not sure what that landscaping would be or whether it's necessary. But I just would point out that between the flooring and the landscaping, I think the cost for the option 1 and possibly saving money by if the equipment were scaled to younger children, that there are some costs in that 275,000 or whatever that could be reduced maybe significantly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie. Appreciate it. That's all for the public. It's up to us. I would suggest somebody make a move a motion to, we'll start with option 1 and then we can go to option 2 if we want. Somebody makes a motion to budget $275,000 in the budget and authorize the city manager to contract to procure option 1 small footprint, ADA compliant, and wheelchair accessible play area with rubber or ground cover any cots. Leave some of that in their hands to deal with the details. Anyhow, I'll entertain any motion you like.
Well, Mayor, for the purposes of moving this along and discussion and getting a vote on the table, I will move what you just stated. And the only thing that I would add, and I guess it's an aside to the motion, is that I have a strong preference that the walkway that comes from the parking area into the top lot is not concrete, but is an environmentally friendly surface.
I don't think that needs to be the motion, Dick. I think they've heard you and we're
Okay.
nodding over here, so I think we'll be fine. So we have a motion on the floor. Is there any second? Well, then I'm gonna hand the gavel to Patrick Gossett and I'm gonna make a second. So we've got a motion on the floor. I'm taking the gavel back. We have a motion by Commissioner Byrne and a second by Mayor Stan Mills to move to budget $275,000 in the budget and authorize the city manager to contract to procure option 1 small footprint, ADA compliant and wheelchair accessible play area with rubber ground cover targeting tots. So we've got that on the floor. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Starting with Commissioner Dick Byrne.
Aye.
Commissioner Edward Shanowski.
I'm going to abstain.
Commissioner Susan Gay.
Come back to me.
What?
Come back to me.
Oh, come back. Commissioner Jay Legree.
No.
Commissioner Gossett.
Aye.
Who else we got? Commissioner Gay.
Yeah, I'll just tell you that the difficulty I'm having is the budget amount. It is the 3rd highest cost in the general fund CIP. And by itself, that is the reason, we're spending so much time on it. It's to take on a life of its own. By itself, that might not be a huge issue. Something's got to be 3rd highest, right? But the last I heard, or what we budgeted last year, when we did decide to stay with the current footprint, that was a definite decision last year. And I think would be again, and that's great. But the cost we heard then was $100,000. And it was only in the 11th hour here that now it's become $275. And what I heard today was that there's a lot of fine tuning that needs to get done. And while I totally believe in the city staff to make that happen, and with the outside contractor maybe taking into account all the things we've talked about and the thing that that some of the variables that Julie Davis mentioned, I'm having a hard time budgeting $275 when we have deferred $1.4 million in CIP expenses because of COVID, and we now have to make up for those. So I would be more comfortable with a a smaller budget and letting them work out the details that match that budget. And I guess for that reason, I'm going to have to vote against it. But I'm not against the playground.
Thank you, Susan. So you're not voting?
No, I'm voting no.
You're voting no, okay. Before I vote,
Never mind.
okay. Stan votes yes with the parameters given. That's, I want to note on the record that Commissioner Calusi left about 2:45-ish, so she's absent. So that's 3 yes votes, 2 no votes, 1 abstention, and the motion is carried. Thank you very much. With that, we want to go on to the next item of business, which is the broad review of the general budget. My hope would be that you get all your questions asked and answered today so that we don't need a budget session 6. Budget session 6 is scheduled for the morning of our regular March meeting. And if we don't need it, then that would give everybody a short break before the regular meeting in March, in which case we would be voting to accept the budget. Sharon, how do you want to start here?
I'll start it off, Mayor. And again, we have a balanced budget here. The combined amount of the operating budget with the capital outlay budget is $27,682,385,000. Not to belabor the issue, but Commissioner Gay, $100,000 last year was budgeted because we are confident that we will get grants. This is the
Right.
second year that we've been dealing with the Tot Lot, and the 100,000 last year was the number that was put in because we were confident we were going to get that amount of grants. With that said, I'm hoping that the commissioners will realize that a $27.7 million budget in the grand scheme of things, with the revenues and the expenses balanced, the fact that we had a unprecedented year in the budget year 2021 ending on March 31, unprecedented in the fact that we certainly lost revenue, lost parking revenue with everything that we were facing, with decreased parking revenue from in allowing merchants and business owners and restaurants to place barricades, with the city absorbing that amount. We more than made that up with property transfer tax that we were budgeting the same amount this year. We're not looking to have that extra windfall that we had this year, although I do believe that we will continue the upward trend for some short period of time. We added the hotel accommodation tax, not thinking we would meet our projections, but they're coming in very close to what we have. And everything else I can say that I've been saying in this 5th meeting now is pretty much on target. So with that, I know that we have a sound budget. We will continue to monitor expenses as we do on a regular basis. Department heads are aware of the fact that, we're in some iffy circumstances still. Although, I would venture to guess on the positive side that we'll have a stronger summer as things start improving with vaccinations. Just being here this past weekend, there was very busy traffic, not only in the city, but on the highway. And it was a cold weekend, but I think people are now starting to come out of the house, if you will, but also be very, very careful in doing so. We'll continue to follow the governor's guidelines. Safety is foremost, and I know that I'm confident that we'll get through any hurdles that we're faced. I don't think we can have hopefully not a as precarious a position that we were in this past year, in the future. But if we are, we'll make do. There is just one, item that is on the, agenda, with the grants. I know, Commissioner Calusi had requested, the status update for the grants and other commissioners. If you'd like to go over that, Mr. Miller can do that with you, but he made some projections, regarding where we can, receive some grant funding, and then, caught you up to date with where we are for the, grants and revenues on the current projects we're working on. We also had, Mr. Dukes compile, legal expenses. Commissioner Gossett had requested that. You all received that. If you want to, ask any questions about that, we would entertain anything.
Well, I think, Sharon, if, without getting into all the individual details, if you could just give a brief summary, just so everybody knows how much money that we're spending on legal fees. I mean, obviously, we've got, legal fees for the Planning Commission, legal fees for the Board of Adjustment, Board of Commissioners, legal fees separately for the Knights of Columbus lawsuits, and other lawsuits. And I'm not asking for a detail of each one, just maybe a total, so that people understand it's not $10,000 or $20,000, $50,000 that our legal fees are. And of course, legal fees are based upon some of our normal workload, if you will, but also on the lawsuits that are we've been challenged with this year. Bert?
I compiled, I guess you received the graph and then the summary. The legal fees year to date through March the 4th are $606,000. And basically about 95% of that is two firms, our city solicitor's firm of $259,000 and the Conley Gallagher of $321,000. Apologize for the typo of a transposition on that chart for Conley Gallagher, but I'll fix that. But that's not even for the full year, so we'll probably, you know, I don't know what we'll be at the end of March, but it's certainly going to be more than $606,000. And the one thing we have done on our budgeting is we've set up separate accounts for Board of Adjustment and the Planning Commission's legal fees. They've become so material, we felt that they should be separated so that we can run reports and give more transparency on the total legal fees for the city. But, and we've done that in the chart. So that's pretty much the summary. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I don't, well, you've got some coming up, but I want to know maybe a separate question. That is, if we pursued separate attorney representation for the Planning Commission, do we have monies in there that could be used?
Well,
can we find some money?
Well,
Same thing with a planner. There's those two questions. An attorney for the Planning Commission dedicated to the Planning Commission, also a planner for the Planning.
The answer is yes, Mayor.
You'd be able to find some.
We have money budgeted. I hate to find money because we're always money, but we do have money budgeted for ancillary services and contracted services for that.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Commissioner questions, Commissioner Legree, and then Commissioner Srnowski. Jay?
Yeah, I'm not ready to leave capital improvement projects. As long as the accretion project for Lake Gerar stays in, I can't vote for it. And I agree with SOLA 3. Until we get a stormwater management plan, I think any plans to dredge the prong should not go forward. So that's where I'm held up. But as far as the general budget, I'm good.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. Commissioner Stranowski?
Yeah,
Oh, whoops, I'm sorry, Jay had one more point.
I
Go
thank,
ahead.
I thank Bert very much for bringing those numbers forward. I really appreciate it, Bert. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stranowski?
Yeah, my question is for the city manager, Bert. I'm having a difficult time finding the reference document. Bert, did you send that out?
I didn't get it either. I don't have anything like that.
I haven't.
I don't either.
Yeah,
You're talking about the chart
yeah.
that Bert's referencing?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that just came in today, so I apologize, but the other legal fees were, sent to you. The chart just, gives you a different interpretation of that.
Well, I
Well,
don't
there was
I
one-
have either thing.
I don't, me neither.
Okay, well, it's easy enough to get them to you. There was a chart a separate chart where I just broke out the Board of Adjustment and the Planning Commission and showed their fees. And then the one sent out today compiled everything and gave you a total by department as well as by attorney on what we spent year to date.
So I will send that to you, Commissioners. I apologize. Bert had sent it while we were in our meeting this morning, and that's what he's referring to, but I will get that out to you right now.
Okay, is there
And,
also? I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, if Ann could retrieve that document also, we can embed that into the agenda. It's a public document, certainly. Go ahead, Commissioner Stranowski.
And thank you. And Sharon, was there anything else that was emailed for this meeting? I obviously have all the attachments to the agenda, but if there was an updated CIP, I've not received that either. Or are we just?
No, we didn't have anything updated in the budget or the CIP. I assume you received the grant information that was embedded?
Yeah,
Yes.
everything that was embedded received, but nothing via email.
Okay, all right, well, we'll certainly get them out to you.
Just for clarification, the CIP draft that we're working with is dated February 18th. Is that the most recent?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Just to help you, on the operating expenses, there were no changes from the budget on February the 19th, with the exception of reallocation of expenses in the beach patrol. And again, that was done to create better transparency. And number two, there were 2 accounts added to disclose the legal fees for the Planning Commission and the Board of Adjustment. And they will remain in the future so we can always have a comparison. But other than that, there were no changes.
So Bert, I have in front of me, the capital program dated February 18th. You indicated that's current. What I have either misplaced or haven't gotten is the 5-year capital improvement program that has the chart over the next 5 years. Is this something you can send out to us?
We can.
Okay, that'd be very helpful. Thank you. I think rather than starting till the next budget year to talk about the 5-year CIP, that we'll start it sooner than later.
That'd be good.
I've got Commissioner Stranowski again, and then Commissioner Gay.
Yeah, my question is, how are we proceeding here? Are we going through the year-end, the overall budget page by page again? Are we doing capital improvement plan separately? How do you want to move forward in this meeting?
Well, nobody speaks up, then we have to assume all the documents are fine. So I would suggest that if you all have questions, that you identify the document and highlight some questions.
All right.
And then we can exhaust that document before moving on to the next one. Do you have something you'd like to target, Ed?
Yeah, Well, first, I've got questions regarding the year 2021 ending, the city manager summary. Then I've got questions on the 2022 operating budget. If we could just very quickly go through that page by page, or only the pages that I have comments. And then I'd like to go over the capital improvement plan.
Well, go ahead and, pick one and
Okay.
give it a start.
City manager, on the summary, your budget report comments, the mercantile licenses through January 2021, it was $155,000 below. I think you said that COVID may be a factor in that. Is it businesses that have not renewed their licenses? Is that the biggest drop off there?
Yeah, Commissioner, I prepared the narrative, so you're gonna shoot the right messenger.
No shots fired.
The mercantile licenses, that money still is coming in, but we went to a December calendar year. We went to a calendar year on the mercantile licenses, so I was hesitant to go ahead and project how much we would get, because this is the first time out. But we will still be receiving money for those business licenses as for the period January to December, or actually more than January through December, because we made this switch. I think we got 18 months in there.
Yes, we do.
So, but answer your question as to why, I would assume that it's because people haven't renewed licenses.
Right.
That could be the only reason.
Right. And I think a lot of people probably had it, they're in the rhythm of June renewing their license for effective July 1. So are you going to be sending out reminder or delinquent notices on that?
The billing department does handle that, and yes, the answer is yes. And as Bert just said, we are continuing to get this in. This is I think the report you're looking at is as of January, so we still have February and March to get through.
Right. Okay. And same question with rental tax. I'm assuming most of the rental tax was coming in February, and that's not yet accounted for.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, we're a little short on the rental tax, but basically, I'm looking at possibly $100,000 short. I don't think there's too much more, because the real estate agents actually submit the money for most of the rental tax.
Okay.
So I think almost all the real estate agents, last I checked, had sent their money in. So any revenue for rental tax would be coming from individuals who rent their own properties.
Okay. Who probably all do it last minute. I know I did it last minute. So there should be, I suppose, some increase that came in February. Okay, that's good to know. Those are my only questions on the narrative.
And you had questions about 2022?
Yeah, the operating budget. And I will be fairly quick, I think. And do we want to go page by page? So if other people have questions, or do you want me to just go through all of mine?
Well, what's your next document?
The operating budget for 2022, and I'll jump right.
Is anybody else going to have questions targeting the operating budget? Nope. So just target Ed with your specifics, please.
Okay. Some of these are high level. So on page 10, which is the administration expenditures, retirement employee benefits, I think jumped up quite a bit, and we know that just more people have retired, and that's fine. My question is this for, this amount, is this for all employees? This isn't just for employees that were in administration, correct? This lumps all retired employees?
Yes, you're
It's
right.
not broken down by department?
That's correct.
Okay. And when we look at the pension amount, which is a few lines higher than retired employee benefits, this is, I think I'm just looking for some clarity on where there's a pension expenditure and where there are defined the retirement savings, I'm sorry, or the 475B deferred compensation. So when it says pension, it's not truly the pension that some employees probably still have. These are retirement plan contributions, correct?
Well, what they are is the thrift plan, what we call the thrift plan, is the plan that the city matches. And the 457B is a deferred plan, but the city doesn't make any contribution to that.
Okay.
So what this represents is the city's contribution, the matching contribution for the thrift plan, which is a defined contribution plan, unlike the police department, which is a defined benefit plan.
Okay. Is there any reason why we don't do a combination of the two and have it be more of a 401k type plan?
Well, the 457B really is a 401k.
It's just the government.
But we don't do any match there, and the police don't, they don't participate in the thrift plan. They only participate in the state retirement plan. Very few people participate in the 457B simply because there's no match.
Right. So I guess my question is, why would we not do a 401k with a match?
Well, the
rather
thrift
than
plan,
the thrift plan separately, which is essentially a match.
yeah, the thrift plan, it really is the 401k as we traditionally think about it, because there's a matching element to it. The 457B, all it does is allow the employees to defer income. They don't get any benefit from the city on that, but it would make sense to have two plans that you both contribute to both of them, and I'm not sure, it probably wouldn't even comply with the regulations to do that. But it's been quite a few years since these plans were put into effect, and it does seem a little odd that we would have two plans to begin with, but I'm sure there's a reason. I don't know what that is, but we do match employee contributions in the thrift plan.
All right, you've answered my question. Then the next question is related to travel expense and conferences and training, which I think the travel expense usually relates to going to trainings and different conferences and stuff. And the city is pretty generous in that regard with training and conferences and certifications. I guess my question is to the city manager, because I know there's been some turnover of employees, and those employees received quite a bit of training on the city's dime, or certification on the city's dime. Do we have any clawback provisions where if someone leaves after the city has expended monies to certify them or train them on certain areas, they become more valuable of an employee? that if they leave within a certain time, they pay that monies back, or it's pretty typical in the corporate world that would happen. So we're not paying to train people and then they leave and go get a better paying job someplace else. Is that
Well,
something?
and you make a good point there, but it's not typical in the public sector that I'm aware of. And we are generous. We want to train our staff to do the best job that they can. We recently had a staff person who had a considerable amount of training and did go off for not a better job necessarily, but a relocation. And I think that the time he spent here with his training paid off very well for the city in having that educated amount. But unlike an education reimbursement, so if we sent someone to and so that's the only time I've heard of in the public sector, an education reimbursement where you actually assist in paying for a higher education degree, a college degree, or a certification. If you do leave within 3 to 5 years it varies, then, there is a percentage of payback. But we don't have that for, as we see here, a $12,000 expense.
Okay, I just a question. It kind of popped out at me, and you're right. Trainings and general trainings and conferences and stuff, not usually, but I think we've done a lot of certification programs, which are valuable to people.
And many of them, commissioners, are a requirement of their job. So, in order to have them employed here, they need to be certified. I'll add that, this conferences and training, travel expense, we didn't used to have that. We have that now because, again, we want our employees to be best educated so we can move forward with for training purposes and certification purposes.
Okay, it's fair enough. Just asking the question, and I agree. We want top notch and well trained people. On page 14, which is the bandstand, we've budgeted, I think, $15,000 more than we have in previous years, and this a little bit more for the operational expenses of that. Is that something that we're planning on doing this year? And they're actively seeking entertainment at the bandstand?
Yeah, so actually in conversations with Corey Grohl just a few weeks ago, and I was going to bring this forward in April, but now that you're questioning it, the bandstand program we intend to comply with again and put these programs on starting Memorial Day. Corey was able to get the state guidelines, which we will meet. We will have social distancing, and we will, enforce mask wearing as much as we are able. So in an effort to bring back some kind of normalcy in following the state guidelines, we will have those programs again.
Okay. On that same note, are we planning to open up the convention center and hopefully get some revenue from that this year?
Well, the convention center is another story because it's indoors. So again, following the governor's guidelines, we don't know that yet. As of now, it's not being opened.
Okay. Oh, on page 22, which is budget DUI salaries, can you explain what that is? And I may have just missed it or forgot.
Let me do it. Commissioner, these are state grant programs, and the DUI is a drug prevention program, and essentially it's an in and out. We're estimating what we're going to get.
Understood. You just refreshed my memory. I appreciate it. And then for parks, the Parks Department, page 28, we've got a contractual services of $115,000. Is that Spazzato?
Much of that is Pizzato, yes.
Okay. And then, so do we, further down, there's trees, pruning, and landscaping for 40,000. Is that also Spizzato, or is that something there's another company that does some of this work?
No,
Sussex Tree does the.
Okay.
okay, yeah, so it is Sussex Tree. And some of that, trees, pruning and landscaping, is that what you're looking at?
Yeah.
Yeah, some of that is, I'd say, you know, the bulk of it is Sussex Tree, and other is, Liz's, own budget and what she puts into that.
Okay. That's all I have on the operating budget, Mayor. Thank you for those answers, Bert and Sharon.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are you done? Did you have more on anything?
If anyone, I think others, like Mr. Legree, said that he had some capital improvement plan stuff. So I will wait before speaking again.
Okay, next, with her hand up is Commissioner Gay.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say thank you, Sharon, for this grant status update. It is very useful to see just how much can get funded this year. And I see that's about 1.1 million, but I also noticed that you've got the Baltimore Wilmington down for the current fiscal year, I guess, because that arrangement was made with Delta, but actually I consider that a benefit for next year too, since most of the work on that is not going to start till after, so that's another 100,000 that we have to spend. And I just confirm for me, because I think it's good for the public to know, and for the other commissioners, if they don't already realize, that to the extent that we get this grant money, then it doesn't change the capital budget for the year. It essentially becomes our reserve, our savings for the year. Basically, it cannot get used for other things. It goes into the kitty, right?
It's restricted, so yeah, we wouldn't be allowed to take grant money and not apply it toward the intended purpose and, you know, under the restrictions.
That's not what I meant. I meant that if we are able to get grant money to offset a budget item that we have, which in this case, all of these are budgeted items, that budget money then becomes, we save that. We don't spend it on other things. It becomes an additional.
Unless we amend the budget later.
Yeah, that would, and yeah, that's correct. I mean, essentially, you're right. It just goes to our fund balance to.
So it's almost like a built-in savings plan, I guess, for lack of a better. But that actually is one reason. Just I mean, because Sharon explained after my vote about the Tot Lot that we had only put 100 in last year because we were expecting a grant. Well, we're still expecting a grant, but we're budgeting the whole thing. But I had always been under the impression we do budget the whole thing. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get it right, because we've got this built-in savings plan, for lack of a better word. And I just don't, I think it's a good amount. We're obviously, hopefully gonna be able to save well over $1 million by getting grant funds. That's a good thing. But then the other question I had, and this does go to capital, are we ready to move over to capital? Because my next question is kind of a general one about that. Are we ready? And that is just what other, we talked about Kent Street. We talked about earmarking some of the proceeds for Kent Street. It's obviously a one-time gain, and we want to be able to use the funds. I understand that Bert had set aside $750 for debt reduction, but that still leaves about 100,000. I'm sorry, 300,000. And then we freed up about 75 today with our vote on the Tot Lot. So I guess I wonder, what other priority items do you have that we could potentially move in?
Well, I'm sure Mr. Williams can come up with a great.
That blank checkbook.
Yeah, but as we go along here, I think what's budgeted in the CIP is what we're going to focus on. The projects that were delayed have been brought forward, many of them, and many of them have had, I'll say, different components of the project differentiated in other areas. So not in other projects, but so if we had to delay something, then it's quite likely that that delay meant this year or next year fiscal year, we'll be doing some study based on not specifically related to construction, if that makes sense.
Well, so,
So we have delayed projects and we have certainly brought most of them forward
yeah,
again.
most of them. And the one I noticed that had been pushed aside a couple of years was the LED retrofit. And I really had hoped that because it got pushed 2 full years. But that isn't really the part of my question today is, what are we doing about the Lake Avenue? I mean, that's a lot of money that we're getting. What are we doing with it?
With Lake Avenue?
I mean,
Phase two?
I'm sorry, Kent Street. I'm sorry. Screwed up. Kent Street.
Okay. Well, we have hopes of, Mr. Dukes has hopes, I should say, of putting that in, or
Debt reduction.
debt, into debt returns. And I know the mayor has spoken about purchasing potentially additional property, and nothing really has been decided. So I think we need to sell it first and look to see where we can best utilize that. My recommendation would not to be not to have a one-time use of that money, because we can look at it for future purposes. I think the mayor's idea of purchasing additional property, perhaps adjacent to property that we already own, for future construction of maybe public works facility down the road, that would certainly make great sense.
So first I hear that, but basically what you're saying is we can deal with all that. We don't have to deal with that in the budget for next year, even though that revenue is going to be coming in the budget. Is that what you're saying? We can deal with where it goes after the fact, after we approve the budget?
Yeah, I mean, if you want future discussions after the property is sold and whatever amount that is sold for, we can earmark that in the budget. You can, certainly advise that you don't want it to reduce debt. I think it's best to look at it when we have the funds in hand.
As long as we can do that, that would be great. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gossett?
Yes, just one question back to the grant proposal for a question. The potential grant-funded CIP projects, is that any priority of projects, or is that just a listing of what perhaps is available?
Commissioner, that's just a listing of the projects that are included in the capital budget that could potentially be not completely funded through grants, but grant funding could be applied to.
And is there any mechanism that you utilize to prioritize those grants or prioritize what we have in the CIP that could be matched with grants, or is it just as they come available, or what is the thought process that gets us to the point of attaching a grant to a specific project in its priority?
It's usually based upon what grant is available at the time, and then certainly the timing of the project as well, because we need to capture the grant early in the process in order to ensure that we get those funds in time, because most of the time it takes a while to draft an agreement and then get a purchase order, and then you can't submit for any reimbursement prior to the date of the purchase order. But typically it just depends what grants are available, when they're available, and then what projects are eligible.
Okay.
And mostly we do try to focus, or lately we've focused on infrastructure improvements. But for example, the electric vehicle for the boardwalk, the electric vehicle charging stations, those are rebate programs that DNREC offers that we became aware of in the current fiscal year that we are able to tap into, and we're hoping to do that for the next fiscal year as well.
Thank you.
Anything else, Commissioner Gossett?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Sharnowski?
Yes. I was trying to find something on the capital improvement plan and I can't, and maybe it was never put on there. But I think, I can't remember if a recommendation came from the streets committee, or mayor, it was from your committee, the beach and boardwalk. But on the north end of, just north of the Henlopen Hotel, all of those parking spots, the flow of traffic, there's some dead space. It's kind of an oddly configured parking there. I thought we had a recommendation to redesign that and put in some additional parking, et cetera. So is that something that was just never moved forward, or am I just, I can't find it on the capital improvement plan?
Well, Commissioner, the Boardwalk Committee put forth some recommendations on how to deal with ingress and egress at the northern tip of the boardwalk. The Street and Transportation Committee, I think, had some of their recommendations. The recommendations did not mirror each other by any close means. But I think what happened is that morphed into the Gerar Lake master plan.
Yes.
And so that's on hold until we decide to put it back on the agenda. You know, it was not well received by some in the vicinity. That doesn't mean it shouldn't be brought back and put to rest, because as I mentioned earlier today, it is in the 5-year CIP, I believe. And so we need to take time to properly vet that program, which encompasses that entire triangle area where Mariners Park is, as well as the easternmost part of Gerard Park there.
I agreed. That should come back. My recollection is they were two separate things, but they may have been combined, and my recollection is just bad. Thank you for that update. And I wanted to ask Commissioner Legree on the, he's got an objection to the accretion restoration project. And if he wouldn't mind just articulating that objection, at least for my consideration.
We're putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg. The accretion is ongoing. It's happening every day. We're not filtering any of our inflow pipes. And as a result, debris, solids, everything just keeps coming on in there. In addition to that, we're not taking care of the biomass that comes into the lake. Trees are hanging over on the north side, all of them in violation of really good stormwater management. The very best filters you can have for stormwater are trees, but they can't be leaning over the lake and dropping their leaves and their branches and all that in the lake. We got to stop all that. In addition, the inflow coming into if you'll stand on Olive Street, Ed, and look during a hard rain, the water just is gushing in, and that's got to be stopped. And there are good ways to stop it. We just don't do that. Once we get that done, I think the dredging is by all means recommended, but dredging a lake is a very serious event for all the waterfowl and for all the animals that live in the lake. So let's just do it one time, and let's do it after we get a plan to take care of our stormwater. And that's why I'm so solidly against that until we have a stormwater management plan. And I think we're spending $25K on a stormwater management project, and I don't even know how that's been going. I'm just relying on Kevin to push it forward as planned.
Well, and I think
stop the accretion, as soon as we stop it, I'm ready to dredge it.
So I'm just, yeah, I'm asking the question because I'm looking at, the $75,000 we just kind of saved today, and looking at some other things here, like if now's not the time to do the accretion. I guess my point is I'm very disappointed that we're not putting stormwater management or some comprehensive plan in the capital improvement plan now.
You better believe
There's
it.
money
And
to do that.
yeah, I agree with you so much. We just need to get that stormwater management plan going. And
Commissioner Legree, a question for you there. In that listing, we have a park master plan, Lake Gerar, in the CIP for 2023. Is that what you're referring to as a master plan, or is that something different?
nope, not even in the neighborhood, Commissioner Goff. A stormwater management plan is to manage the stormwater that comes off the streets, there's some stormwater that comes from the watershed of Lake Gerar, more than Silver Lake, but that all just flows into the lake. It's not filtered. If you'll stand on Lake Avenue over there when it rains, you can see it gushing into the storm drain on the street, and that just goes straight to unfiltered.
Jay, how much? I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I'm with you, and I'm pleased that Edward raised these questions again. How much of this problem is being taken care of by the current work on Lake Avenue?
I don't, Dick, I think they're still using their street drains that were there already there. I don't think they're putting sand traps in. I don't think anything's being done to the slope of the lake to slow the water down.
Well, instead of guessing, why don't we ask Kevin to weigh in on it? And Kevin hasn't listed stormwater management as a priority on the CIP, so I'd kind of like his thoughts on that.
Yeah. Thanks, Commissioner. The fact that there's not a big high dollar value stormwater item in this year's CIP, I mean, it was a conscious decision on my part anyway, that we want to get the feasibility study done on the establishment of a stormwater utility, which would then create a dedicated funding stream for some of these priority stormwater projects. You'll see the big ones we have on there in the out years are big. I mean, when you start redoing or enlarging a stormwater system down Bayard Avenue, I mean, that's not something we do out of our general fund, right? I mean, it's going to be a huge expense. So we want to get a funding mechanism in place so that we have a dedicated funding stream available to do some of these projects. As far as Lake Avenue Streetscape Phase 2, it does include a stormwater portion where they put in new storm inlets, new drains, a new pipe under Olive Avenue extending to the lake. So rehabbing a lot of that underground pipe.
But no storm scepters, right?
No storm scepters, no sand filters, none of those types of things.
So Kevin, when you say that you want to complete the feasibility study, which I think we've got 25,000 more in for this coming budget year, and out of that, you believe you'll have the information to set up a task force to talk about a stormwater utility fee to generate income that would then pay for some of the other projects like we have listed. I believe we had some stuff on Bayard Avenue over the next couple of years.
That's correct. We have Bayard that we want to try to upgrade a little bit. We've got the Basin 40, which is in Kent, Dover, Sussex kind of area that doesn't have an existing storm drain system. And then we've got a lot of just stormwater pipe that needs to be rehabilitated.
So let's just say, line 37, which is stormwater improvement, we've got 315 budgeted or on the capital plan for 2023 and just over 600 in 2024. So you're thinking that we'll have a utility in place to pay for that instead of those funds coming out of our general budget?
That's correct.
Ed, the accretion will not cause any problems for a long time. It's just muck that stays there. And if you'll take tests at the other end of the lake, there's a weir on the very east end of the lake that falls out and goes into the ocean. There's a drain out there that the state had us test and do sampling. And if you recall, Lita Bennett, who was an engineer for GHD, did a study, and she found that the Grenoble outfall, that was the cleanest water we had in the whole town. So Lake Gerar is keeping things really clean. It's just slowly filling up with muck, and it'll be okay till we get the really big stuff done on Baird and Basin 40. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of infrastructure that Kevin's going to need.
Yeah, when it comes to Lake Gerar, I'm a little more worried about the western end of tip over there. And I think it looks bad. You can see everything there. And I think most of it is from the construction projects on North 3rd and some of those bigger houses on Oak that were recently renovated in the past couple of years. But Kevin, do you recommend, or I know this isn't really your area of expertise, but would you recommend waiting a year to do that accretion project until we have a better handle on stormwater management?
I think the plan all along, at least in my brain, was that we didn't want to do anything with respect to that prong of the lake until we finished the Lake Avenue Streetscape Phase 2, because we knew that was going to be an impact to that corner. I think all along when Envirotech did the Lake Gerar maintenance plan or program, whatever they came talk to us not too long ago. One of the things that was in their plan was to, at that point in time, I think he did call it a dredge. I think what they've come up with now is you can actually excavate that from the bank with one of those long-armed excavators. Last time we talked about it, that was his position going into that. But that was always on the books for something that needed to be done. And I was advocating for waiting until we finished the streetscape because we knew that was going to be an impact to it. What we did see with those houses that were rebuilt at that corner, it did provide a huge amount of siltation that flowed into that western prong and has exacerbated an already bad problem. So whether you do it now, you do it 2 years from now, I mean, that's up to y'all. But it's been on the books to get done for quite some period of time. Before I got here, it was on the books when I first came in. So we were just trying to follow through on that recommendation that was made some years ago.
Now, I understand that, and the way you articulated that makes more sense to me now. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Byrne?
I wanted to discuss this issue also that Commissioner Legree brought up earlier, and I think we have discussed it some. I'm not satisfied that we're doing things and putting dollars in the right order here because it's still confusing to me that we've dug up so much of Lake Avenue, and if we're not putting in state-of-the-art storm drain management, then that means it's going to have to be dug up again. I mean, is that right, or am I just not clear on this? And are we not putting in state-of-the-art stormwater management because we didn't budget for it? I mean, is this kind of on us that we didn't plan well enough, or is there something else going on that I should just be clearer on?
You're right, Dick.
Well, if you put storm scepters in, my idea would be that they are likely going to go in the park, so it would not tear up any of the Lake Avenue Phase 2 project or Phase 1 project. Kevin, we really haven't talked about it much, but the sequencing that Jay outlines makes sense. I think the problem is cost. We're talking about big bucks. I don't know that we've had the money for that, but, if y'all are leaning that way, we could take that 55,000 for the dredging. We could take, the 75,000, that was budgeted for the tot lot and combine that together. And maybe that would give us down a deposit on, storm scepter or something. Kevin, do you have any input you wanna?
Sure, Mayor, thanks. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of the storm scepters at this point in time until we can validate, one of the thoughts we have had dealing with GHD and their testing protocol to try to track down the sources of the bacteria is these structures that we're using to collect, bottles, cigarette butts, and to filter out or to cause some of the sediment to drop out, may be a cause for our elevated bacteria levels at certain points. Now, I'm not saying that's what's happening at Lake Gerar, but that's clearly something that we target as a potential source in our areas of the commercial district where we're seeing high bacteria levels at our structures, our stormwater structures in the commercial district. So we're really hoping to kind of get a handle on that and either prove it one way or the other. The storm scepters we have on Lake Gerar now, we do go in and clean those out, but they're really just collecting, they're at a position of the lake where they're really just collecting trash that blows into the storm inlet. So it's getting, like I said, the plastic bottles and cans and that kind of thing. It's not really collecting a lot of sediment that would filter out. The issue at the one of the major issues in my mind on the western branch of Lake Gerar is that such a small portion of that is city-owned. The vast majority of that, and where we're seeing the huge amounts of debris, trees falling in, pine needles and everything else falling in, is not within public space. And I don't necessarily know what our code would allow with respect to requiring certain level of maintenance on that private property of that particular branch of Lake Gerar. I know we've done a lot on the public space part with the buffer zones and those kind of things. But I think the big contributor for that accretion is certainly after we get the work done on Lake Avenue and the new pipe installed, the vast majority of that accretion is coming from private property. And I don't know that the storm scepter is going to have much of an impact on that.
Well, we need to solve that problem because we can spend a ton of money and doing projects on the public side, but if that's what's causing the problem, then we keep spending money on something that's not going to fix the problem.
Sure. Now, clearly there was an existing problem in that western branch for quite some time. And I know when I first got here, it's an old, it looked like an old swamp, right? It had turtle logs and everything else in there that was just kind of blowing into that western. And all the leaves and everything that fall in the lake, as soon as you get a westerly breeze, it all goes right up into that corner. So in my mind, it's not a one-time thing. I think it's just part of your long-term maintenance program for that branch. With or without storm scepters and with or without something to deal with the private space on there, it's just going to be something that recurs I don't know if it was ever kind of dug out before, but maybe it's an every 10 or 15 or 25 year kind of thing. You have to go in and dig that end out. I'm not sure.
So, just to ask, at least to keep.
Commissioner Burns, go ahead.
Okay, well, do we need legal clarity on what we can do on the private land that abuts the lake? If that's a big percentage of where the problem's coming from, and if we're not sure what we can do in cooperation with those homeowners or in spite of those homeowners, whatever the case might be, we should get some clarity if we don't have that.
At some point, this might be worthy of, well, it is worthy, but of a separate agenda item on a future meeting, because this is bigger than what I think, you know, it's gonna mushroom. And we
Yeah.
wanna try to get rid of, through the, budget talks, not to cut anybody off, but, if you would
Right.
consider that, let's figure out how to get through the budget. That if you wanna hold off on the, 55,000, there's a consensus to do that for the, accretion reduction, then that's fine. But that's my suggestion, so that we can better devote time and advertise this topic. Anything else, Commissioner Byrne?
No, thank you.
You're good. Commissioner Jay Legree, before I go to, Susan?
Well, my questions were about that stormwater utility study. So if we're going to make that a separate agenda item, then I'll hold on that.
Okay. Anybody else?
Mayor, I have one question. Two
Uh,
questions, actually.
Yes, City Manager Sharon Lynn.
So, thank you. So is the consensus then to remove the accretion project from the CIP? Because we are trying to finalize the budget so we can have a potential vote next week.
I would like to move it a year back, and then we'll talk about it again, or maybe 2 years back. As long as the water is clean coming out of Lake Gerar, I don't think we have a problem. We have a problem, but it's not dangerous.
Okay, we'll do
I
that.
see.
And the CIP includes 30 parking meters, T2 parking meters. This is phase 3 of our third year of our rollout of the T2 meters. As we did in the previous 2 years, we would like your permission and a vote to permit the T2 go-ahead for these prior to the adoption of the budget, because they really need to order them now, and as we did in prior years, to get these in by the Memorial Day deadline. So that is
18.
$218,000.
Yeah.
Line
That would
40.
be looking for.
If we can make a motion, I would move that we authorize the city manager to proceed with the Lake Cosmos parking pay station phase 3 of the T2 for $218,000 in order to meet the Memorial Day deadline for parking beginning.
I don't, this isn't a voting meeting, is it?
Well, we just did earlier on the tot lot. They usually aren't. I was surprised about that, I'll have to say.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think the agenda says that
It
we may
does.
vote.
yeah, it is. I just wasn't expecting.
The agenda says formal votes may be taken as appropriate. So we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Got a motion on the floor by Commissioner Gossett and a second by Commissioner Gay to authorize the city manager to enter into contract and purchase additional parking meters through T2 in the amount of $218,000. Is that correct?
That's
Motion.
correct, yes.
With that, we'll do just a group vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. And that motion is carried, City Manager. Thank you very much.
Commissioners.
If there's no more commissioner comments, I'd like to go to the public. Julie, are you still there? Nope, Julie's dropped off. We have no members of the public on board ready to speak, so that leaves it up to us. Are we ready to skip the budget meeting, budget number 6? It's already scheduled for 9 a.m. on March 19th, and go right to the vote at 2 o'clock regular meeting on the 19th?
Well, I'd ask the city manager if she plans on prioritizing that $75,000 that we took out of the lot top or
And the 53.
and the 53. I know it's a little bit less than what the first year of the LED retrofit would be, but could we at least get started on something like that?
Hold on a second, folks.
So I would recommend we, because of the late date, that we, put it in, tie it into our, help me out here, Bert.
Fund balance.
Our, we're gonna, include it with our fund balance, tie it into the budget, and, we'll, if we, look at that, we have a interesting year, then, at least we have those funds, that 75,000 and the 55, so that's, gives us an additional cushion.
So that gives us an opportunity to discuss it further after the budget's approved, without having to conduct an extra budget meeting. And it's whatever the pleasure of the commissioners are. If you'd rather have that budget meeting to discuss it and finalize it, we can certainly do that. Can I get some feedback, please?
I would like to see the city manager use it as she just described, put it back into the fund balance.
Anybody else?
I agree, put it back in the fund balance, but I would like us to revisit this in the middle of the year and see how the budget looks and, maybe if everything's going well, prioritize some additional things for the capital improvement plan.
I would agree with that. If it's being put aside, the idea that we could use it later, I think that's good.
Very good.
Yeah,
Well, that's the plan, we'll go with. Is there any other comment from the commissioners? If not, Ed, your hand's still up. I think you're done. If not, we will cancel the budget meeting number 6, originally scheduled for March 19th at 9 o'clock, and instead go to a regular meeting at 2 o'clock on March 19th and conduct a vote for the budget. If there's no other comments, staff, do you have anything you want to say? Nothing on our end, nothing from your end. I want to thank you very much. It's been a long day. I appreciate your stamina. And with that, we'll call this meeting adjourned at 4:11.